Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Andrew Lee and I'll be your host for today's session, which should last around 45 minutes. In a second I'll hand you over to my colleague Jess Twemlow. Jess works with organisations across Scotland to help them prevent and manage waste and to help them set up effective waste management contracts. Previously she worked as an advisor for one of the UK's largest waste management companies. So Jess is going to share some of that experience with you today. During the session, if you'd like to ask Jess a question on anything she's covered, you can type your question into the box shown here on screen and click send. You can do that at any time during the webinar. Your questions will come to me and we'll stop at a couple of points so I can put as many questions to Jess as possible. If you enjoy tweeting, you can also tweet your questions to me too. Okay, just before I hand you over to Jess, could I ask for 30 seconds of your time just to run a quick poll, please? On your screen, you should see a number of options here to the question, what is your preferred time of day for joining a webinar? To help the team plan future webinars, could you tell me what time of day would be best for you? I'll just give a second there to look at these answers. I imagine lunchtime will be popular, seeing as though it's lunchtime just now, but you know, if it's useful to run these during mid-morning or mid-afternoon office hours, that would be good to know as well. I think we've got most of the votes in now, so I'll just share the results with you just for your interest. No surprise that lunchtime looks quite popular, but we can certainly use this to try do some mid-morning and mid-afternoon webinars in the future. Thanks very much for that. That's been a great help. And with that, over to you, Jess.
Okay, thanks very much, Andrew. Just bring it on to the next slide. Okay, there's no one-size-fits-all solution when you're selecting a waste and recycling contract and a waste and recycling service, but there is strong potential from those who are commencing the process of engaging a waste and recycling contractor to learn from those who have already achieved improvements in efficiency, in cost and in resource recovery through best practice waste contracts. I think best practice waste and recycling contracts can potentially achieve a range of benefits, including reducing the waste costs for your organisation, increasing your organisation's recycling rates, improving your environmental performance, perhaps meeting your corporate environmental commitments, but also meeting perhaps community and customer expectations. So over this webinar, we're going to outline a 7-step process to help you obtain the best waste management solution for your organisation. We're going to be providing you with some advice and guidance that's going to allow you to identify the best waste and recycling contractor. So looking at how to understand your waste streams all the way through to perhaps managing your contract after you've selected it. I wanted to start off, before we go into the 7-step process, just with a little bit about legislation in Scotland, because it's so important that whatever waste and recycling contract you choose, that you are complying with all the relevant legislation. So the first one is the Environmental Protection Duty of Care Scotland Regulations 2014. Now, if you produce or handle waste, then you've got a legal duty of care to manage it properly. It's important to have these, that we have these legal requirements, as waste does have the potential to harm human health and the environment if it's not managed appropriately. Now, the duty of care is basically a chain of responsibility where it extends from the source of waste right through to final disposal. Now, the chain needs to show where the waste has originated and the path that it then follows to final disposal. It's designed really to ensure that anyone handling the waste has the right information to allow them to handle, treat and dispose of the waste appropriately. So if you produce or handle waste in any shape or form, it's your responsibility to ensure that you handle it correctly. The duty of care says you must take all reasonable steps to keep your waste safe. And you can't wholly delegate this responsibility to your waste contractor. You need to ensure that you're playing your part properly as well. Let's make sure that we're putting waste in the right bin, that we're ensuring that our waste contractors are compliant, and make sure we supply our waste contractors with sufficient information about the waste to be able to treat it properly. Next, I just quickly wanted to talk about the Waste Scotland Regulations 2012. Well, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of these regulations and are already complying. Now, the regulations came into effect on the 1st of January 2014, and it has really changed the way that organisations in all sectors across Scotland think about the amount of waste they produce and how they should manage it. Now, the regulations require that organisations manage their waste in ways that they might not have done so before. Now, we must now present dry recyclable materials, so that's paper, card, glass, plastics and metals, for separate collection. Now, all materials collected separately for recycling by your waste contractor are banned from going to landfill or going for incineration. The recycling part of the regulations are just one part of it. The other part is food waste requirements under the Waste Scotland regulations. Now, they require that food businesses present their food waste for separate collection. Are you a food business? Well, do you process, do you distribute, or do you prepare or sell food? You may be a non-food business, but you might have a staff canteen on site, in which case you're preparing and handling food. Now, there are sort of two separate requirements under the food waste requirements. If you produce over 50 kilograms of food waste, you should already be separating your food waste, as the deadline was the 1st of January 2014. If you produce between 5 and 50 kilograms of food waste, you need to separate your food waste from the 1st of January 2016. I'm not really going to go into any other detail about the Waste Scotland regulations, but if there is anyone who wants to have a chat about them and wants to understand a little bit more about how they should be complying, then they should get in touch. Okay, Andrew, I think we're going to take a quick poll now before we move on.
Okay, sure. Just let me get that open for you, Jess. I think the next poll was the question, how effective is your current waste management contract? From very effective, effective, ineffective, very ineffective, or don't know perhaps. Just give you a second there to make your choice on that question. We're halfway there. It's looking quite healthy at the moment. I think about 70% of people currently think that the waste management contract is effective. I'll just share those results with you. I think we're just about there with all the votes, so I'll share them now so you can see the results. The Jess, 67% saying effective, 17% saying ineffective, 17% don't know.
Okay, that's brilliant. Well, hopefully all of you are going to learn sort of some hints and tips next. I've talked about the 7-step process to make sure that we do have the best waste management contract. Well, that's up on your screen now, and I'm going to take you through step by step. From step 1, understanding your waste stream, all the way through to step 7, managing your contract. Okay, so if we go to step 1 first, understanding your waste streams. Now, before developing a contract or engaging a waste contractor, you really need to understand how much waste you're dealing with. Only once you've established how much and what type of waste you produce, can you work out the best plan to manage it. So the first step should be understanding your current waste and recycling outputs. Now, establishing this data at the outset can really save a lot of money in the long run, as it will give both your organisation and potential contractors a firm basis on which to estimate costs over the length of your contract. Knowing your organisation's waste stream and to which products that you want to be able to recycle will also be really great assistance if you head to the market for your waste and recycling services. Now, in order to better understand your waste and identify opportunities for improvement, it may be necessary to conduct a waste audit. Now, a waste audit is a process used to quantify the amount and types of waste that an organisation generates. It'll give you a breakdown of the amounts. Our Green Champions training, that's just up on screen now, a screenshot from it, is a free training course that we offer that's in bite-sized modules. And Module 2 provides advice on how to actually carry out a waste audit and gives you lots of tips and lots of supporting kind of templates to actually carry that out. So if you are interested, I'd really recommend you have a look at our free Green Champions training course, and we will be sending a link out to that course after this webinar. So step 2 is know your service options. Once you understand your waste streams, you can find the right waste and recycling service. You should research waste and recycling options to find the best service for your organisation. And it is worth spending a little bit of time investigating what's on offer, because charges will vary dependent on the type of waste and the type of recycling service that you might want. I think unlike other utilities like electricity and water, there's no set or regulated charges for waste. I think that can make it really difficult when we're trying to compare the various services on offer. So before you do jump into the procurement process and sort of start speaking to waste contractors, there are a number of things that you need to know and understand about the waste and recycling services that is going to have an impact on the performance and cost of the service. So some things to consider when reviewing your service options. The first one is collection frequency. Now there's two main types of collection frequency offered. It can either be scheduled or ad hoc. Scheduled services are regular. Now these are often weekly or fortnightly and are generally more cost effective in terms of price per collection. But you may pay for unnecessary collections if your bins aren't full. However, this service, it does require less staff time as the bins don't have to be monitored as often. Now, ad hoc services are arranged once the bin or skip is close to full, and they really are ideal if your waste and recycling volumes fluctuate with seasons or even with events that are taking place in your organisation. However, the price per collection, it is generally higher. And I think you also quite need to carefully monitor your bins to determine when they reach capacity. So it will require perhaps a little bit more staff time. Next thing to think about is your receptacles or your equipment that you might want to have. Now, waste management suppliers offer a range of receptacles and equipment for different applications and with different cost considerations, site requirements, and also collection frequencies. I think you might be surprised how much a bin size can really affect an organisation's waste performance and costs. So it is really important just to take that little bit of time to consider all the available options. Choosing the right bin can not only reduce the amount of waste produced, but it can also reduce your costs quite considerably. So let's have a look at some of the options now. The first one is recycling bags. Now, recycling bags are ideal for dry recycling if you don't have the space for bins. They're also good for smaller volumes of waste, or if you have sort of quite fluctuations in the volumes of waste that you produce. And bags are charged per bag, so it's really clear sort of how much it's costing you. Next one to look at is wheeled bins. Now, wheeled bins come in a whole range of sizes, everything from a 140 litre bin to a 240 litre bin. That's usually the size, 240 litres is usually the size of your wheeled bin if you have a wheeled bin at home. And it all goes up to 1100 litres for a wheeled bin. Now, wheeled bins are good if you've got consistent sort of medium volumes of waste, and they're usually charged per bin lift and the frequency of your collection. I'd say sort of 240 litre wheeled bins are really perfect for offices and smaller businesses as they can fit through standard doorways. A 660 litre wheeled bin is designed also to fit through a standard doorway, and ideal if you've got larger quantities of waste but you've got sort of limited space to actually store your waste collection receptacles. All the way up to 1100 litre, you know, they're ideal for larger quantities of waste, and it's about equivalent to perhaps 5 standard household waste bins. Next, you might want to consider is open or enclosed skips. For example, they can be anything from size from 8 cubic yards all the way up to 12 cubic yards. And they're really great if you've got consistent volumes of waste, anything for sort of medium to large volumes of waste that you're producing. And they're charged per bin lift, but they can also be charged per weight as well, by weight as well. Some equipment you might want to consider is balers and compactors. Now, baler is basically a machine that compresses materials into bales, which are then secured with wire or a similar fastening material. Now, recycling balers are usually used to compact recyclables, such as cardboard or paper or plastics, into blocks, because then they can be easily stacked and transported. Now, the blocks of recyclables that come out of bales, they do vary in size and weight depending on how big your baler is. Now, a baler is really good for businesses if you're generating sort of larger volumes of recyclable materials like cardboards and paper and plastics. And it really enables less frequent service as you can store the bales for a less frequent collection. However, you do need to think about any staff time because you might have sort of manual handling and manual loading of waste kind of into the baler. However, they can be good because you can get possible revenue generated depending on the quantity of waste that's actually baled. The next one to think about is a compactor. Now, a compactor is a machine that basically pushes your waste or recycling material into a container and then pressurizes it and squeezes it to reduce the volume of the material. In general, the compaction ratio is perhaps sort of 4-to-1 reduction from loose to compacted waste. This means compactors can be really good to replace the need for several bins. So if you do produce larger volumes of waste, then you should definitely be considering whether a compactor might be more cost effective for you because you're going to have a less frequent collection service as well as that waste is compacted. Now, a compactor, as far as charges go, it's charged by weight. Might want to consider food waste with the Waste Scotland regulations. I know more and more organisations in Scotland are collecting food waste. Now, for food waste, most contractors will provide an external storage bin, such as a wheeled bin, as part of the service. Now, they should be no larger than a sort of a 2-wheeled bin, so perhaps a 140-litre bin or very maximum 2 40-litre wheeled bin, and they shouldn't be overfilled because food waste, it can be really heavy. Waste contractors, they might also provide you with a 10-litre or a 23-litre small kitchen caddy to help separate your food waste in your organisation. Small caddies, they can be put in small spaces such as your kitchens or your offices or your food preparation areas or your tea points. Separating materials. Now, there can be financial advantages from separating your materials into the various material streams, as you're required to do to a certain extent under the Waste Scotland regulations. Now, metal and plastics and cardboard, they can reduce collection costs if clean and contaminated, and they may even provide a revenue where materials are presented in bulk. Now, the value that you might get for these materials, they are very dependent on the market price of specific materials and also transport costs to reprocessors. Now, letsrecycle.com is a really great resource for monthly and historical recycling values for different materials. Next is to think about your volume of waste. Now, you need to have a reasonable volume of any material stream to make it viable for a waste management contractor to collect it. Now, if your organisation does not produce enough waste, maybe consider combining your general waste and materials for recycling with perhaps neighbouring organisations. Working together with other organisations can lead to reduced waste management costs. So it is something to really consider if you're in like a business park or a similar situation like that. Now, Andrew, I think we were going to take questions now, if anyone had any.
Yeah, we've got a few questions coming for you, Jess. The first question here, are local council waste collection services typically less expensive than private contractors' equivalent services, and if so, why?
I don't necessarily think they are, to be honest, these days. I wouldn't say that local authority collection services are cheaper than any sort of private sector services, and it can really vary from sort of contractor, from business to business, depending on the type of waste that you're producing and what the volume is. So that's why we kind of always say, you know, don't just go to kind of one waste contractor if you are looking at your options. It's really worth maybe going to 2 or 3 waste contractors, and we'll talk about this later, really to understand what the costs are.
Okay, thanks, Jess. Another question here. Different suppliers often provide rates in slightly different ways. For example, all-inclusive rates, tonnage and transport rates. Do you have a template which would help break down and compare the rates from different providers? Again,
that's really interesting. We're going to move on when we're talking about how you can start kind of evaluating and comparing service to service, about sort of pricing schedules. So we will come on to that in the next section.
Okay, another question here for you, Jess. If my waste is managed by a contractor, Are they responsible for ensuring that appropriate action is taken to comply with the waste regulations?
Yeah, really interesting question there. I think both the producer of the waste and the waste contractor do have responsibilities under the Waste Scotland regulations. Using a waste contractor does not remove any of those responsibilities on yourself. It's going to be your responsibility to work with your contractor to ensure that the requirements are met. So I'd say, you've got to look at it as a partnership, and both the contractor and yourself does have a part to play.
Okay, I think one more question in this session, Jess. What happens if I have concerns about what is happening to my waste once my waste contractor has picked it up?
Yeah, really interesting. I think you need to make sure that any person or organisation that you transfer your waste to and who organises any waste transfers for you is registered with SEPA. Now that's really crucial to tackle any kind of waste crime. Now as a minimum you should be asking for a copy of the waste carrier's registration certificate, and you can get in contact with SEPA because they have a public register on their website to confirm whether it's genuine and valid. You should also be looking for the sort of broker or dealer's registration, and again you can check SEPA's website against the public register. So I'd say if you do have any concerns about what your waste contractor is looking at, go on the SEPA website and sort of speak to them to see if there are any issues.
Okay, Jess, there's a couple more questions there, but we'll stop again maybe in about 15 minutes. And
that's great. Okay, next off, I think we were going to have a quick poll, was it?
Okay, so if you're looking at step 3, identifying potential waste management contractors, it'd be interesting to know, how would you find potential waste management contractors if you had to go out and look? So that question is up on screen now. A number of options: online search, telephone directory, yellow pages, ask other organisations, speak to your local authority or the business resource centre. So it'd be interesting to see what type of results we get on that. I think just wait, give it a little second for the answers to come in. Okay, let me just close that. I think we're just about there. Close that, share the results. Okay, 0% saying the business resource centre, Jess, that's quite an interesting one, and 71% in an online search. Nobody's using yellow pages.
No. Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. I think once you know what materials you want to recycle, how often you need a collection service, and what perhaps receptacles and equipment that you require, you then are ready to identify your potential waste management contractors. It's really interesting that how many of you were at the Business Resource Centre? Oh, nobody said the Business Resource Centre. Okay, the Resource Efficient Scotland Business Resource Centre is a search tool that basically provides information on reuse and recycling services in your area. Now that you can use this tool to seek out waste management contractors that offer your desired waste and recycling services. And I would say there may be a number of large national waste companies that spring to mind first when you're thinking about waste contractors, but don't ignore the smaller operators. And this tool is great. You've got the web address up there on screen now to really understand who is available in your area. I'd also point you in the direction of the resource sector commitment. This is a voluntary agreement designed to help organisations identify waste management companies who deliver the very highest standard of resource management. Signatories basically have committed to promote continuous improvement, innovation, excellent customer service, and to enable organisations to reduce waste and just be more resource efficient. The resource management service providers that sign up to this commitment are basically agreeing to provide high quality recycling services which are supported by clear communications, and they're consistent with all the legal requirements, that they're going to have continuous improvement based on your feedback, that there's going to be clear contracts and a clear charging structure that are reasonable, competitive and well managed. And they're also going to provide an innovative approach to make sure that you get the maximum value out of your waste management contract. So I'd really recommend that if you are looking at waste contractors, to see whether they are signed up to the resource sector commitment. Okay, once you've identified possible waste management contractors, there are a number of ways to engage with them depending on the size of your organisation. Now, it might be easier for small organisations to approach waste contractors directly for quotes and advice, and then compare quotes and negotiate contracts. Now, depending on your situation, it may not be viable or necessary to prepare your own contract. In that case, it might be easier to adopt a less formal tendering process for your waste service. You should use your power as a purchaser, though, and seek quotes from a number of potential contractors and compare them. I think many contractors, they will want to visit your business, your organisation in person and provide advice on what services they might have available that can help you. Now, for larger organisations, it might be appropriate to develop a tender invitation document, or TID, that could be sent out to potential waste management contractors. And then they'll basically respond to your TID by providing suitable solutions. Now, it's important that you provide potential waste management contractors with as much information about your waste and recycling needs as possible, including perhaps the composition and overall volumes of waste, and any data that you might have on that. In addition, you should sort of specify the services that you believe you require, such as bin sizes, number of bins, of any other bin infrastructure. You should always allow sufficient time for potential waste management contractors to prepare a response to your TID. And remember not to think of potential waste management contractors as providing just a service, but rather think of them as a potential business partner that can assist your organisation to achieve better outcomes for your waste management and ultimately the efficiency of your organisation. So let's have a look at sort of some key things to consider when you're developing a TID. But this is also relevant for smaller organisations as well, to think about the kind of information that you might want to discuss with your waste management contractors. Now, the first thing you should be providing is the scope of service. Now, the scope really defines your desired service level, and it should be really as clearly defined as possible. Now, include bin sizes for general waste and any specific recycling materials, the number of bins that you might want, any other infrastructure, maybe things like locks for bins, and the frequency that you want your waste bins collected. You should also include a short description of your organisation and any data that you have on the amount of waste and recycling to be managed. And also think about maybe any site constraints or issues that the waste management contractor might have to keep in mind. Now, ensure that the scope of services is flexible enough to allow for innovation from your contractor, as they might suggest a new solution for your waste and recycling needs. And I would also say, consider offering a site visit for any potential waste management contractors so they can really understand any site-specific challenges and really ensure that the service is tailored to what you need. Now, a solid, well-defined scope is so important because it will avoid price creep over your contract, which may arise if potential contractors are provided with unreliable data and a loose scope. Something else to consider, and I think someone had mentioned it earlier with their question, is sort of the pricing schedule. Now, the pricing schedule really contains the cost information to be supplied by the tenderer. So a well-defined pricing schedule will ensure that you're able to easily compare costs provided by the tenderer. And also ask whether there is any additional costs not listed. That might include charges for bin rental or any duty of care documentation such as waste transfer notes. And you might wish to provide a spreadsheet or a template to ensure the information is submitted in a consistent form. And Andrew?
Yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile just asking on that topic, Jess. There's a question on the screen there. Would a sample template be useful to you? Maybe something that Jess could put together and make available on the website, if that would be of interest. So far, 100% is saying yes, it would be useful. So I think you've got a job to do this afternoon, Jess. I will close that poll now. But that's great, and that's something we can certainly look at doing.
Definitely. Yeah, really good to know. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. Just some other considerations when you're sort of developing your TID or starting to think about what to ask for. Bins and equipment, you should state whether you're going to supply your own bins and equipment or whether you want the tenderer to supply these. And if a tenderer is supplying them, who's going to be responsible for any repairs or replacements if the bins are damaged? Depending on your requirements and the length of the contract, the tenderer might provide bins and equipment for a one-off fee, or they might charge a lease cost, or they might even build that cost into your service charge. You should always include a separate item on the pricing schedule to account for these costs. Might also want to think about cleaning and maintenance. From time to time, your bins and equipment, they will require cleaning and maintenance. So, are you going to want your waste contractor to do this? Then ensure that it's clearly defined in your scope of service. Things like recycling assurance. You might want some assurance that materials separated for recycling are sent to appropriate facilities. Again, ask your tenderers for details of the final destination of your general waste and recycling. Other things to think about: duty of care. When you engage a waste management contractor to transport, recycle and dispose of your waste, as I said right at the start, you have a legal obligation to ensure that the waste is disposed of in an authorised and responsible manner. So that you should request the tenderer's duty of care documentation and a statement of its waste management procedures. You also might want to consider things like health and safety. Now, organisations have responsibilities regarding health and safety in the workplace, and that extends to your contractors. So you should request perhaps the tenderer's public liability insurance certificates, and where appropriate, you might want to ask them to provide their safe working procedures or even risk assessments. So next, you want to evaluate your tenders. Quotes and tenders should be evaluated against your chosen criteria. For transparency, I'd always say that your evaluation criteria and also the weightings are specified in your TID. And even if you're just going to request quotes for a number of potential waste management contractors, you should still outline what your priorities are. Now, try not to focus exclusively on the lowest price tender. Instead, identify the most qualified waste management contractor who's going to provide the best value service that meets your needs. Examples of key criteria are up on screen now. So everything from perhaps compliance with relevant legislation, perhaps performance and flexibility, all the way to innovation. Maybe you want them to offer things like staff awareness training or bin identification systems, all the way through to the price and quality of the service. Step 6 is select your supplier. Once you've selected your preferred waste management contractor, you're then going to be ready to enter into final negotiations and eventually sign a contract. Now, things to consider when negotiating a contract. Think about your contract duration and also the termination. Longer contracts provide contractors with more certainty, and they generally lead to lower prices and costs. Now, waste contracts, they sometimes have a length of perhaps 3 years, but they can be as long as 5 years. However, while a longer contract might secure a lower price initially, it may restrict your organisation from being able to test the market and renegotiate at any time during that period. So really carefully consider the term of your contract and ensure the contract duration is appropriate and suitable for your organisation's needs. Now, some contracts, they may include clauses that allow for cancellation or early termination, particularly if either party is perceived to have breached the terms and conditions of the contract. I'd always say develop a robust set of key performance indicators, KPIs, for inclusion in your contracts, as it will not only assist you in improving the performance over the contract, but also provides a tool to measure contractor performance. Now, KPIs, they can either be based on incentives or penalties. KPIs, they should be measurable, they should be easy to understand, they should be achievable, and they should be easy to manage. Now, there's some examples of KPIs up on the screen now. So it can be everything from perhaps a summary of the total waste to landfill and the total material recycled, itemized each month on invoice, all the way through to perhaps the contractor being required to attend one site meeting per month or one site meeting every couple of months, all the way through to zero missed collection services on each calendar month. So there's lots of things to consider. So you've really got to think about what's important for your organisation and make sure that you're capturing that in KPIs. Something else I'd say you want to consider is reporting. Now, the provision of reliable waste data is crucial to the ongoing management of your contract. Information you might wish to request includes a summary of the waste streams collected, the volumes collected, and also that performance against the KPIs we talked about in the previous slide. Now, these should be set out in your contract. and regularly check that the data that your contractor provides to ensure that you're getting what you asked for. And then you can identify any anomalies and flag them and then discuss them with your contractor. Now, I would say develop a database with all this data and regularly update it when you receive data from your contractor. Now, ensure that that database is simple and easy to update. Now, Resource Efficient Scotland, we have developed a measuring and monitoring spreadsheet that you can use to record this data. And we'll send a link out to that measuring and monitoring spreadsheet at the end of this webinar. Something else to consider is contamination. If your recycling bins are contaminated with non-recyclables, you might be charged a penalty and the load may be sent to landfill, which might result in higher disposal costs. Now, ensure that any additional fees for contamination are clearly outlined in your contract. Your contract should include an acceptable contamination rate, usually less than 10%, and any penalties that will apply if that contamination rate is exceeded. Other considerations is things like renewal. Many contracts do have an automatic renewal clause that stipulates a period towards the end of a contract when, unless you notify that you wish to renegotiate or change the service provided, you'll be locked in for another contract term. So make sure you read your contract carefully and be aware of any automatic renewal clauses. Flexibility. During the contract period, you may identify opportunities to reduce costs. For example, you might want to change the frequency of collection or bin size, or you might want to reduce the number of bins needed, especially if you're sort of undertaking actions to try waste prevention and reuse. So specify a performance review every 6 months to ensure that you can adjust the service to your needs. And miscollections. Miscollections can create problems, so ensure your contract guarantees that missed collections will be picked up in a certain time period. So step 7, our last step, is you've got to make sure that you manage your waste and recycling contract. Even the most successful waste and recycling contract, it can't manage itself. You've got to make sure that you work closely with your waste management contractor and regularly monitor and maintain the contract. Education and training in your staff should be regular and ongoing to ensure continued success. You should consult with all staff about any changes to the waste and recycling service, provide regular information, and also give them the opportunity to provide feedback. Staff feedback before and after introducing a new system really can be invaluable in uncovering problems. And regularly communicating progress and the performance of your waste and recycling service will keep your staff engaged. Now, Resource Efficient Scotland, we have developed a free staff engagement toolkit which provides a range of downloadable materials to help you. So everything from how to set up a successful green team, to how you can train your staff to become more resource efficient, to how to run recycling campaigns. And if you're interested, the web address for that staff engagement toolkit is up on screen now. Signage and posters. Clear signage should be added to all your waste and recycling points. And Resource Efficient Scotland, we've developed a poster creator that you can use, and the web address is up on screen now. And you can basically customize your signage so it's specific to your workplace, but there's also ready-made signage that you can just print out there, and there's also kind of staff engagement posters to kind of motivate your staff. So if you are wanting to standardize your signage, I'd recommend having a look at Poster Creator tool. Finally, I'd say you've got to monitor performance. There should be regular performance reviews built into your contract. A meeting should be held between your organisation and the waste contractor's representative. Now, the purpose of the meeting is to monitor the performance against perhaps your KPIs that you set out, where KPIs or perhaps expectations haven't been met, to perhaps discuss and agree actions to resolve this. Perhaps to resolve any other issues that might have arisen over the performance period, and also consider any improvements that can be made to your service. You know, what the waste you were producing 12 months ago, it might have slightly changed now. So you've always got to think, is this service the best for my needs? But remember, the performance of your waste contractor is only half of the picture. The other half is dependent on you. The success of the waste and recycling program is dependent on effective management from your side, timely feedback when any issues arise, and appropriate support when necessary for the contractor. Now, we have produced a guidance document on how to get the best waste management solution for your organisation that basically runs through those 7 steps that I've just talked through. And if you want to download this document, the web address is up on screen now. Just finally, I want to really talk about other support that Resource Efficient Scotland can provide for you. Now, we provide free specialist advice and one-to-one support aimed at cutting your energy, waste, water and raw material costs. We can provide free support to help you develop a business case and identify savings potentials with resource efficiency measures. We can help you and support you gain buy-in from your senior management, and then provide support to help you deliver those improvements, whether it's a behavioural change campaign, whether it's upgrading your lighting, installing water efficiency measures, or perhaps implementing improvements that will reduce the amount and cost of raw materials that you use. Now, you'd be assigned an implementation advisor who will be on hand to give you advice and guidance every step of the way. So whether you're looking for specific support or whether you just want a quick chat to make sure that you're on the right direction, please get in touch. We're here to provide free support to your organisation.
Okay, I've just put a question up on screen there actually. If you would like Jess or one of the team to get in touch, if you haven't had support yet and you would like support, just click the box there that says yes, and I can get Jess or one of the team to get in touch after the webinar. I won't share the results of that poll with you. Okay, that's great, thank you. I'll close that poll now.
Okay, excellent. Just move on to the next screen. I'd also recommend you go on our Resource Efficient Scotland website and have a look at our Savings Finder. Now, we'll email out a link to the Savings Finder after this webinar. Now, the Savings Finder is basically an online do-it-yourself resource efficiency audit. And it's a tailored report to help you identify priority actions that you should focus on. It's really quick to do. It takes you through, I think it's 10 questions asking you about your water use, your energy use, your raw material use. And it's really a quick way of getting a bespoke action plan to kickstart your resource efficiency initiatives and really to start realizing savings. So if you just want a quick idea of what you're doing and perhaps what actions might help you, then I'd really recommend that you have a look at our Savings Finder.
Great, thanks Jess. There's a few more questions come in if we've got time. There 5 minutes at the end. A question here, is it worth looking into revenue for waste such as cardboard plastics? What is the rough revenue?
Yeah, I'd really recommend that you look into revenue for waste. Definitely if you produce larger volumes of things like cardboard, plastics, paper, or if it's good quality, especially things like office paper. If it's clean, there is a potential to get revenue from it. I won't give any specific figures because they can fluctuate, but I would say go on the letsrecycle.com website because basically they have data sort of month by month how much you'll be getting for things like paper and cardboard and metals, so you can really understand that. And then it's going to your waste management contractor and having that discussion with them about whether you can get revenue or whether you can perhaps just get a reduced price on your waste collection charges.
Jess, if you could give me that link, I'll share that after the webinar.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, our council do not currently collect separate waste streams, although they mentioned that in the near future they will be installing separate bins. Does this mean we are not compliant currently?
Perhaps I could follow that up with you and sort of get your details. I wasn't sure from that whether they are recycling at the moment or what they're actually segregating at the moment.
Okay, well, I'll give you the details of that question. Take that
yeah, because the Waste Scotland regulations, you should be segregating your paper cans, glass, cardboard and metals. Under some circumstances, you can collect those materials together in a commingled collection. So it might be that you have a commingled collection rather than a separate collection. But I'll get in contact with you.
Okay, a good question here. Is there any new waste legislation for businesses due in the next 12 months?
No, there isn't. The only thing that I'd say is the food waste requirements of the Waste Scotland regulations. If you're producing between 5 and 50 kilograms of food waste, you will have to comply by the 1st of January 2016. So that's sort of the only thing that's perhaps on the horizon at the moment.
And will rural businesses be required to separate food waste in 2015?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Obviously, the person there knows there is a rural exemption to the Waste Scotland regulations that if you're in a rural area you don't have to separate your food waste. There's no plans at the moment for rural businesses to have to separate their food waste. I'd always say that even if you're in a rural area and you are exempt, if you are a food waste producing business, do look at your options to see whether it might be more cost effective for you to actually segregate your food waste. But there's no plans for that part of the Waste Scotland regulations to be changed.
Okay, just one final question for you, I think. Is my landlord responsible for managing the waste contract?
Okay, if your landlord's responsible for managing the waste management services, they also should be responsible for providing a recycling collection services. However, you should review the waste services contract between yourself and the landlord because it might depend on that. So yeah, review your contract that you have with them.
Okay, that's all the questions we have right now, Jess, and I think that just about concludes today's webinar. If I could just thank Jess for her time. Jess, again, that was great. Lots of fantastic ideas there. Thank you very much. And also thank you all for joining and taking part in today's sessions. I will share Jess's slides with you shortly, and I'll include links to all the resources Jess mentioned. Just to remind you, we have lots more webinars coming up. You can find out where they are by looking at our website. I'll send a link to that page after the webinar also. I hope to see you again soon, but until then, thanks again for joining today and see you soon.